Welcome, and thank you for joining me. I'm going to talk about What About Me? Thwarting Compassion Fatigue and Teacher Burnout. I'm so glad that you are starting this course. That tells me that you want to feel better and care about yourself enough to make some positive changes. All right, our topics for this course, I'm going to define compassion fatigue and talk about why it's happening, what could be some of those compounding factors, who's more susceptible, and what are those signs and symptoms, both physically and psychologically. I also found a self-test that you can take, and we're also going to talk about burnout and what the effect of burnout is and what the stages of burnout are. The second thing I'm going to talk about is thwarting the effects of compassion fatigue. And I have gathered through research and my personal experience several ideas for you that can help you combat compassion fatigue. And that's mindfulness or a growth mindset, self-acceptance, self-preservation mindset, having a strong peer network, prioritizing, letting go of results, journaling your thoughts, seeking positive influences, self-care strategies, permission to feel, create, and I also found some workbooks that you can do. And my name is Tiffany Fromm, and I am currently the Director of Visual Arts for Fort Worth ISD, and you can find me at that email address. I originally got my bachelor's degree in art education from Brigham Young University, and I earned my master's degree from TCU in educational leadership with a principal certification. I've worked as an art teacher in all grade levels, and I also served as an assistant principal, and now I'm a director. Now, I'm not a therapist. I don't have any type of therapy training. So you're probably wondering what drives me to this subject of compassion fatigue. And I actually only heard the term compassion fatigue about a year ago. But when I did, I recognized those signs and symptoms and what had been happening in my life. And it drew me to research it more and ultimately want to share it with each of you. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of trauma in my past, and I didn't always have the financial resources to see a therapist on a regular basis. And so I found ways to heal my own soul, and that's why I wanted to share those with you. Some of the things that have gone on in my life is my youngest child has a chromosome disorder, a rare genetic chromosome disorder called Prader-Willi, which is going to be an ongoing issue throughout his life, and something that is, while we love him and enjoy having him in our family, it definitely is a burden and causes a lot of extra strain in our family. After 16 years of marriage, I ended up getting a divorce, which was pretty traumatic to have that part of my life fall apart when I felt like, I made a good choice, and then it didn't work out. And so I'll also talk about some of those things that I did to kind of get over that. And the most recent thing was my 15-year-old son in 2019 was diagnosed with brain cancer. And that was the single most, hardest challenge and trial and whatever you want to call it, trauma that I've ever experienced. And as a caregiver, and a mom, it, definitely took a lot to get through that for the whole family. Me personally, to be able to support my son through that type of treatment. And gratefully, he is doing well. He is a senior in high school this year and has had clear scans so far. And so we are coming up on, I think, about a year and a half of him being cancer-free. So we're very excited. So I'm currently married to a wonderful man. His name's Rob, and we raised 6 children together. And it's busy, and there's still a lot of stuff that comes up. And so I have to be mindful about taking care of myself when I am pulled in so many different ways and in roles. And so even if you aren't experiencing compassion fatigue in particular, this will also help you just to create more balance in your life and make sure that you're taking care of you. So in my work world, when I was teaching at Odie Wyatt, which is a school in Fort Worth, I was teaching some of the most underserved students, well, more underserved than I had ever experienced before. And while I love them and I found a lot of fulfillment in being able to give back in that place and see lives change because of the work I was doing, it very much took a toll on my health. And I definitely, looking back, was struggling with compassion fatigue. So a definition for compassion fatigue that I found was it is the cumulative detrimental effect of working with survivors of traumatic life events. 34 million children in the United States under the age of 18 have experienced at least one type of serious trauma, according to the National Survey of Children's Health. So with so many students experiencing trauma like poverty, hunger, abuse, violence, neglect, illness, divorce, death, racism, and more, us as teachers and art educators, or whatever type of educator you may be, are trying to reach those children. And those children are in a place where they don't always feel safe enough to be reached. Now, compassion fatigue has previously been linked only to professions like nursing, therapy, and first responders. But it's more recent years that we're seeing more research with teachers being linked to compassion fatigue. Another definition is it is the mental, physical, and emotional exhaustion that comes from working with people who are in constant states of distress or trauma. And we also call this caregiver stress. So whatever you choose to call it, the consequences from working with people who've experienced trauma and suffering, they're definitely real. And helpers, educators, or nurses, they experience that suffering and a secondary traumatic exposure. And so they often feel weary and worn out because of having to be around and hear about and experience some of that trauma over and over and over again. And so it also happens, when we care too much for another who has shared their trauma, and it's been referred to as the cost of caring for another's emotional pain. And so understandably from this experience, some of our teachers lose hope and burn out because we don't need to experience trauma firsthand to have that same effect in our brains and in our health. All right, there's other compounding factors that make you more susceptible to compassion fatigue. And those are when there's administrative issues, if you don't get along with your administration, or you just don't have an administration that is very effective. The school climate, and that's something that all of us are part of, and what that looks like on our campuses. When parents are not a support, but they're someone that is an adversary, that can make it worse. Other teachers, some of our students, and those behavior issues that will happen in our classrooms. Teacher morale, lack of positive feedback and support. And I know when I was in the classroom, I had a lot of years where my evaluation was skipped because I was doing just fine. And so that lack of support of any kind can make it harder. Tight schedules and also unrealistic expectations. All right, some things that make us more susceptible. Being a female, that's going to make you more at risk. Beginning teachers, teachers who are working in high poverty schools, and that has to do with how much trauma the students have been exposed to is usually higher with students of low socioeconomic groups. Excessive dedication and type A behavior patterns, excessively conscientious, competitive, ambitious, and hard driving, which are all great characteristics, but it makes you more susceptible to compassion fatigue. Compulsivity, perfectionism, achievement oriented, and those with high levels of empathy. And it's important to recognize that some of these things that make you good at working in a helping profession, and in this case, teaching, those are the same things that make you more at risk and increases your risk of having compassion fatigue. And so it also, many of us as teachers identify that's part of our identity. And so having that feeling of this is what I'm born to do is going to add to that natural exhaustion that comes. And I think we set higher expectations for ourselves because, we believe it's important. We want to make a difference, and and those factors which make us good teachers also make us more at risk for these things. All right, this is a very extensive list of psychological signs and symptoms of compassion fatigue, and I'm not going to read them all to you, but just kind of an overview. It's when you're resentful rather than resourceful, detached rather than delighted, and exhausted rather than excited. And one of the most detrimental symptoms is denial, because it keeps you from being able to assess your level of fatigue and stress in your life and keeps you from the healing process. Now, a lot of these things could be symptoms of other things, but if you start to see a lot of those, that's when you need to start paying attention. These are the physical signs and symptoms that I found, and I think they're sometimes a little bit easier to notice. For me, when my sleep starts to get disrupted and I have a hard time falling asleep, or I keep waking up at night, that's when I know I need to do some more things to take care of myself. Also, when I start to stress eat. So if I'm starting to put on weight, it's a sign that, all right, I need to get my life in a little bit more balance and in order because I'm giving too much of myself right now. I found the Professional Quality of Life Scale developed by the Professional Quality of Life organization, and I've linked their website there and have permission to share their test. Go ahead and take that test. It's not going to take you very long, and talk about your results with a family member or a close friend to kind of see where you are. And if those numbers are alarming, please seek out some professional support if that is needed. But before you jump into that next video, why don't you go ahead and take that test? In my next video, I'm going to talk about burnout.